The morning fog still clung to the tarmac as Lieutenant Commander Elena Reyes stepped off the military transport and onto the hardened ground of Fort Ashland. Her boots sank slightly into the dew-soaked concrete, the rhythmic crunch echoing softly as she adjusted the strap of her duffel bag. Every fiber of her body screamed readiness, honed from years of grueling training and countless operations in hostile terrain. Yet today was different. Today, the skepticism wasn't from a foreign enemy or mercenary gunfire. It came from inside, from the men who would be her teammates in the next critical operation. The towering gates of Fort Ashland loomed overhead, emblazoned with the insignia of joint forces, Army, Navy, Air Force. Inside, the sprawling base pulsed with the disciplined rhythm of military life. Soldiers moved with purpose, shouting commands, their eyes focused, hands busy with equipment, weapons, and radios. And then came her, Elena, a single figure in the sea of structured uniforms, moving with a quiet confidence that seemed almost incongruous in a world built around suspicion and hierarchy. As she approached the briefing hall, whispers began to spread like wildfire. "Who is that?" one officer muttered, squinting at her silhouette. "She's not supposed to be here?" Another voice, low and incredulous, added, "A woman in SEALs? That's impossible." Elena kept her head high, her gaze forward, her expression neutral, but she could feel the weight of every doubt resting squarely on her shoulders. She had been trained to ignore distractions, to focus on the mission, to push through fatigue and fear, but human skepticism was different, insidious and sharp, cutting deeper than any battlefield fire. Inside the briefing hall, the atmosphere was tense, almost suffocating. Rows of men in fatigues and tactical gear turned to stare as she entered. Some arms were crossed, others rested on the edges of tables. A few fiddled nervously with pens or weapons, all attempting to mask curiosity and doubt with bravado. Elena's boots clicked against the polished concrete, each step resonating like a heartbeat, her posture rigid yet calm. The commanding officer at the front of the room, Colonel Marcus Kane, paused mid-sentence, a rare flicker of surprise crossing his face as he saw her standing there. "Lieutenant Commander Elena Reyes," she introduced herself simply, her voice steady, carrying the faintest hint of authority, a tone earned from countless missions where hesitation could mean death. There was no flourish, no attempt to charm or persuade. She didn't need to. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. Some men shook their heads subtly. Others exchanged skeptical glances, all silently asking the same question. Why is she here? Elena scanned the room, taking in every detail. Faces hardened by experience, eyes filled with doubt and curiosity alike. This was the moment she had anticipated. Not her first mission, not her first operation under fire, but the first time she had to prove her worth against the intangible threat of prejudice and disbelief. She had trained for weeks to suppress emotions, to move with precision, but she knew that today, perception mattered as much as skill. And in this room, perception was stacked heavily against her. The general briefing began, a litany of codes, operation objectives, and classified details that filled the space with tension. Elena listened carefully, absorbing every word, every nuance of timing, every contingency. She did not speak, for speaking now would draw attention to her presence, and she did not need attention. She needed observation. Observation would be her ally. Performance would be her proof. Around her, the murmurs continued. "She's too young," one officer whispered. "Too clean," another muttered, glancing at her uniform, perfectly pressed, insignias polished to a reflective shine. The room had no idea that the polish was earned through discipline, late nights, and relentless training, a ritual honed to survival instinct. As the briefing progressed, the weight of doubt pressed against her like a physical force. It was an invisible adversary, persistent and nagging. Elena had faced physical trials, mental challenges, and the death of comrades. But this challenge, the skepticism of peers who had not known her path, was subtle, dangerous, and pervasive. Her jaw tightened slightly, a reflex she barely noticed. As images of Hell Week returned to her mind, freezing Pacific waters, relentless drills, the deafening shout of instructors, and the cold sting of exhaustion that almost broke her body and spirit. But she had endured, clawed through, and survived when 21 men had walked away. Then came the moment of attention. Colonel Kane called the room to order. Elena felt all eyes on her, a silent examination of posture, gaze, and demeanor. Some officers looked as though they were ready to challenge her, to test her authenticity. She met every gaze with the same unwavering focus, acknowledging the scrutiny without deflecting, without apology. She was not there to win their approval. She was there to survive, to operate, to execute the mission with precision and courage. A young lieutenant, barely out of training, leaned over to a colleague and muttered, "I bet she can't even pass the swim test." Elena caught the whisper, a smirk flickering briefly across her face. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Words were cheap. Performance was priceless. Every step she took, every silent second she held herself upright, was a challenge, a quiet declaration. I belong here. By the time the briefing ended, the room had shifted subtly. Doubt had not vanished, but curiosity had replaced some of it. Elena's presence was no longer a question of public relations or PR stunts. She was a silent force, a shadow that hinted at capability, at experience, at resilience. For the first time, the men looked at her not as a disruption, but as an unknown variable, one that could tip the scales of the mission. As she left the hall, her duffel over her shoulder, she caught sight of General Marcus Halloway at the far end, observing quietly. His eyes, sharp and calculating, seemed to measure everything, not just the uniform, not just the posture, but the presence of someone who had survived more than most would ever know. Elena didn't acknowledge him. She didn't need to. The general's recognition would come later, in silence, in a whisper that would validate what she already knew about herself. Outside, the morning fog had lifted, leaving the base bathed in pale sunlight. Elena paused for a moment, inhaling the crisp air, feeling the weight of anticipation settle in her chest. This was the beginning, not of a mission, but of a proving ground, a place where every glance, every whisper, and every doubt would test her in ways more insidious than bullets and explosions. She adjusted her pack, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward, ready for the challenge. In the world of elite operators, proof was not given. It was earned, silently, through action. And Elena Reyes had already survived enough to know that by the time her skills spoke for themselves, no one would dare question her again. The memory came unbidden, as sharp as the ocean wind that had lashed her during Hell Week. Elena Reyes could feel it all again. The icy slap of the Pacific surf against her face. The sting of sand cutting into her hands as she crawled endlessly along the beach. The deafening barks of instructors that shook the night air. She had been 18 when she first set foot on Coronado, the youngest in her class, small in stature but relentless in determination. Her body ached with the memory, muscles screaming in protest. But the pain had been nothing compared to the weight of expectation. The instructors called her dead weight during the initial days, a term designed to provoke, to intimidate, to break resolve. Every word landed like a physical blow, every glare a silent challenge. They didn't believe she belonged. Not a woman, not her size, not her age. Most of the men sneered, dismissing her presence as a PR stunt, a token figure meant to inspire media coverage. But Elena didn't need anyone's validation. She needed to survive, to endure, to prove not to them, but to herself that she could withstand the crucible of training. The early mornings had been the hardest. Before dawn, she and the other candidates were forced into the surf, freezing waves crashing over them, while instructors paced behind with bullhorns, shouting orders and threats. Her teeth had shattered uncontrollably, fingers numb as she tried to maintain her grip on the slick ropes and boards they were given. Many men dropped, unable to endure the physical torment or the psychological strain. 21 had walked away in the first week alone. Elena pressed on, pushing her body beyond pain, ignoring the relentless pounding in her chest, the shaking of her limbs. Every step was a rebellion against doubt. Every breath, a victory over fear. Sleep was a foreign concept. When night fell, it brought no relief, only a cruel continuation of exhaustion. Candidates were marched across miles of sand, through mud, and into courses designed to shatter their resolve. Obstacle after obstacle, she faced walls too high, ropes too slick, and mud pits that seemed bottomless. Her fingers bled, her hands torn raw from gripping rope and sand, yet she continued, driven by something deeper than survival, a stubborn belief that quitting was never an option. She remembered a fellow candidate collapsing, gasping for air, crying out for mercy. Some instructors laughed, some turned away. Elena had offered no hand, no help. Survival in that crucible demanded focus, and distraction was deadly. Then came the cold water swims. The instructor's eyes glinted with a cruel satisfaction as the candidates were plunged into the churning surf. The waves tossed them, salt burning every exposed inch of skin, hypothermia threatening to numb even their willpower. Elena's mind went somewhere else, to letters from home. Words from her father etched into her memory. If you quit, the world wins. She recited them silently, over and over, letting the words fuel her burning muscles and ice-stiffened limbs. Her breath came in jagged gasps, her body screaming, but she refused to yield. Each stroke, each kick, each desperate push toward shore was a testament to her persistence. Pain was not the enemy. Doubt was. Every glance from an instructor, every sneer from a fellow trainee, tested her. The men mocked her at first, whispering insults and laughing at her apparent struggle. "She'll never make it," one whispered behind clenched teeth. Another pretty face washed out by the surf. Elena's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing as she focused on the horizon. Their doubts became fuel, propelling her through the impossible, shaping her into someone sharper, faster, stronger than she had ever imagined. By the end of the week, only 5 candidates remained standing, 5 bodies battered, but spirits unbroken. Elena was among them. The final test was the infamous log PT, where each candidate lifted and carried a massive wooden log across the sand for hours, rotating in unison to maintain balance. Coordination was essential. Failure meant collapse. Elena's arms burned, her shoulders screamed in protest, but she kept pace, refusing to drop her end. She felt the strain in every fiber of her being, but she refused to surrender. Her mind replayed the faces of those who had quit, those who had left the moment discomfort became too intense. She would not be them. She would endure. By the time the whistle blew signaling the end of Hell Week, Elena's body was a map of scars and bruises, hands raw and bleeding, muscles screaming for relief. But her mind was sharp, unbroken, and resolute. The instructors, those who had doubted her from day one, finally regarded her with grudging respect. She had survived what most could not. She had defied expectation and shattered the invisible walls of bias that had been set against her. And though her classmates looked at her in awe, some still with disbelief, she felt no triumph in their gaze. Her victory was silent, personal, a quiet acknowledgement of her own strength and perseverance. Now, standing at Fort Hoshland, those memories surged back like tidal waves. The whispers in the briefing hall, the subtle glances of doubt from seasoned operators, All echoed the skepticism she had faced at Coronado. And yet, the difference was stark. Back then, she had trained to survive. Now, she had trained to lead, to command, to execute a mission that demanded respect not just for skill, but for the courage to confront and overcome prejudice. Every glance of doubt at the base was another test, another reminder that history would judge her not for her gender, not for appearances, but for what she could achieve under pressure. Her heartbeat slowed slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath. This was more than just a memory. It was a roadmap. Hell Week had forged her, sculpted her resilience and resolve, and given her the tools to face any challenge. The trials she endured as a young candidate had been preparation, not just for missions in hostile lands, but for the battles of perception and respect she now faced on home soil. And as she stepped further into the base, moving with quiet purpose, she knew that the ghosts of Coronado were with her, silent allies whispering courage into her ears. Elena Reyes had been tested, broken, and remade before she even faced her first classified mission. Every whispered doubt, every sidelong glance, every questioning gaze would now meet a woman forged in fire and surf, tempered by pain and resolve, capable of commanding respect with silent confidence. The battlefield outside might be deadly, but the battlefield within, the one of belief, skepticism, and earned trust, was just as formidable. And she was ready to confront it, as she always had. The briefing room at Fort Ashland was bathed in the cold, sterile glow of fluorescent lights, the walls lined with screens and digital maps displaying satellite imagery of hostile terrain. Elena Reyes stood quietly at the edge, her posture erect, eyes scanning the layout. Operation Silent Veil, the mission that had brought her here, was the kind of operation that was whispered about in military circles, spoken of only in hushed tones, if at all. High-value hostages had been captured by a mercenary faction in East Africa, and their rescue required precision, timing, and an operator capable of seeing the invisible threads of chaos that could unravel the entire mission. Few on the base knew the full scope of Silent Veil. It wasn't just dangerous. It was classified beyond the standard top-secret level. Elena's credentials were sealed in a black file, cleared for eyes that only included the general and a select few. Her name was known, but her record was erased from most databases, hidden behind layers of security and compartmentalization. Today, she was not just a lieutenant commander. She was the unknown variable, a ghost in the system, someone whose actions could tip the scales in ways no one could predict. The General Marcus Holloway entered quietly, his presence commanding immediate attention. He didn't speak at first, letting the gravity of the room settle over every officer present. The operation had been meticulously planned over months, with contingencies layered upon contingencies. The screens flickered, showing aerial views of the target compound, fortified walls, watchtowers, and mercenaries trained to kill. Every angle had been mapped, every patrol timed, every exit and entry documented. Yet even with the preparation, no one could anticipate everything, especially in real-world operations, where unpredictability was the only constant. Elena studied the compound. Her mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, and extraction plans. The mercenaries were ruthless and efficient, well-armed and motivated. Hostages had little room for error, and even less chance if rescue teams hesitated or faltered. Elena's hands brushed the strap of her duffel, feeling the weight of her gear and the symbolic weight of her past, the scars from Hell Week, the bruises from training, the whispered doubts of those who thought she didn't belong. All of it coalesced into focus, sharpening her instincts. She had faced this kind of fear before, and now the stakes were higher than ever. A young lieutenant piped up nervously. "Ma'am, are you sure you're cleared for this?" His tone was polite, but tinged with skepticism. Elena didn't respond, simply turned her gaze to the general. Holloway's eyes met hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He didn't need to speak. In the room, everyone understood that she wasn't there for show. Her credentials were valid, her expertise undeniable. Yet, in the absence of proof, doubt lingered like a shadow over the room. The operation required a team capable of moving through hostile territory with near invisibility. Elena's role was reconnaissance and entry coordination, a position demanding both sharp analytical thinking and lethal precision. She outlined her approach without fanfare, the timing of each patrol, the sequence of extraction points, the placement of cover, and contingency routes in case of engagement. Every word was calculated, every motion deliberate. The room listened, some skeptically, some grudgingly impressed, but all attentive. There was no room for error, and Elena knew it. Hours passed as maps, satellite images, and simulated scenarios were reviewed. Elena walked quietly among the officers, pointing out flaws or overlooked details with subtle authority. Each correction was precise, never demeaning, never dismissive. Her quiet confidence began to shift the room's energy. Skepticism gave way to wary respect. Observers started noticing the depth of her understanding, the clarity of her strategy. A small nod here, a thoughtful pause there. She didn't need approval. She needed results, and she knew that results would speak louder than words. When the final briefing ended, Elena stepped aside to review her gear, checking radios, weapon systems, and tactical tools with meticulous care. She ran her fingers over the straps, holsters, and pouches, feeling the reassuring weight of each piece. It wasn't just equipment. It was an extension of herself, part of the trust she placed in her own hands and instincts. The general approached her quietly, his voice low, almost a whisper. The mission will test more than skill. It will test character. Are you ready? Elena's lips curved in a faint, confident smile. I was born ready, she replied, though she knew the statement was more than bravado. Experience had forged her. Nothing in that room could intimidate her the way the sea, sand, and fire of training had. The general's eyes lingered on her, measuring not just her readiness, but her capacity to command, to endure, and to inspire trust even when doubt was thick in the air. Night fell, and the base became a hive of covert activity. Helicopters were fueled and prepped, vehicles checked, communications calibrated. Elena joined her team in the staging area, silent yet vigilant. Each member of the unit was aware of her reputation, though most had not yet worked with her directly. Skepticism still lingered in some corners, subtle and unspoken, but the tactical efficiency of the team demanded cooperation, and Elena's calm, commanding presence made that easier to achieve. She moved among them like a shadow, observing, correcting, and quietly instilling confidence. As the operation commenced, Elena's mind was both in the present and analyzing possibilities beyond it. The extraction required synchronization to the second, precision under fire, and adaptability to shifting circumstances. Her heart beat steadily, a controlled rhythm forged by years of training. Yet her senses were sharp, attuned to every sound, every movement, every shift in the environment. She recalled the lessons of Hell Week, of countless missions past. Survival depended not just on skill, but on mental acuity, courage, and the ability to see patterns invisible to the untrained eye. The aircraft lifted silently into the night sky, carrying the team toward the hostile compound. Elena's eyes never left the screens, her mind running simulations faster than the helicopter could move. Every potential outcome was considered: ambushes, civilian interference, unexpected patrols. She prepared for contingencies no one else had imagined, her mind a web of possibilities, each strand a potential lifeline or hazard. Her presence was a silent assurance, a guarantee that someone among them had seen every angle, anticipated every threat, and could act decisively. Finally, as the lights of the base faded behind them, the team understood the gravity of the operation. Hostages awaited rescue, lives hung in the balance, and the environment was hostile and unpredictable. Elena's calm, measured demeanor had begun to silence even the most doubtful of her peers. She didn't seek praise. She sought results. And as the helicopter soared toward the unknown, the air thick with tension and anticipation, one thing was clear. Operation Silent Veil would not just test skill and strategy. It would test the very essence of courage, trust, and resilience. Elena leaned back in her seat, letting the hum of the engines and the subtle vibrations of the aircraft settle into her body. Every memory of Hell Week, every whispered doubt from the base, every shadow of skepticism faded slightly in the background. In its place rose a single, unshakable certainty. She was capable. She had endured, survived, and thrived in situations others could only imagine. Now, the mission ahead would demand everything she had learned, and perhaps more. And she was ready to meet it, head-on. The base gym smelled of sweat and tension, a mixture of leather, metal, and determination. Elena Reyes walked in quietly, her boots thudding softly against the rubberized floor, her duffel slung casually over one shoulder. The murmurs began immediately, like ripples across water, growing steadily into a tide of doubt and skepticism. "Who is she?" Someone whispered. "No way she's a SEAL." A few men smirked, exchanging glances of disbelief. Elena's presence, alone, was a provocation, a disruption in the rigid order of expectation that had governed Fort Ashland for decades. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail, the sweat-streaked faces, the tense posture of men who had trained for years to survive under fire, the subtle smirks of those who believed she didn't belong. She didn't flinch. She had faced scrutiny before, during Hell Week, in the unforgiving Pacific surf, in freezing mud and sand, every test designed to break mind and body alike. Those memories returned to her now like a sharpened edge, a reminder of what she had endured and conquered. A small group of SEALs approached, their gait casual but their intentions clear. "So," one said, a hint of derision in his voice, "you're supposed to be a SEAL, huh?" The words weren't a question. They were a challenge. The men circled her slowly, assessing, judging, testing. "Prove it," another said, voice low, almost taunting. Elena remained still, letting their gaze meet hers. She didn't speak immediately. She knew the rules of this game. Words were cheap, action spoke louder, and pride was earned, not claimed. With deliberate calm, Elena set her duffel down and unzipped it, revealing her gear. Her hands moved with precise control as she extracted a combat knife. Worn, the leather handle scuffed, the steel bearing the tiny etching of a trident and initials burned into the metal. The room fell quiet. Eyes widened subtly. Whispers ceased. This was no ordinary knife. Only operators with extensive experience and battlefield exposure would carry something like this, a silent emblem of survival, skill, and commitment. Yet the skepticism lingered. Some still hesitated to acknowledge her capability. The men stepped back slightly, uncertain now, but still not fully convinced. Elena's gaze didn't waver. The knife wasn't meant for show. It was a testament to the truth of her journey. She remembered the nights she had spent perfecting every skill, underwater drills, rope climbs, long-distance swims, hand-to-hand combat, endless obstacle courses. She recalled the harsh words, the isolation, the pain that seared her flesh and soul. This blade, scarred and worn, carried those memories silently. It was proof, though unspoken, of everything she had endured. Before anyone could respond, the base alarm blared, a piercing wail that cut through the room like a knife. The emergency briefing had been called. Instinctively, Elena slung the duffel over her shoulder again, securing the knife at her hip. She moved toward the command center, her every step calm, controlled, purposeful. The men followed, some reluctantly, others with growing curiosity. Their earlier doubts began to shift into a quiet tension. The battlefield, real or simulated, demanded competence, not opinion. And Elena had the competence that could not be argued against. Inside the command center, the general's aides and tactical officers were already at work, monitors displaying maps, satellite imagery, and live feeds from reconnaissance drones. The hum of activity was constant, a mechanical rhythm of military precision. Elena stepped forward to observe, assessing the information as if reading a complex battlefield novel, anticipating movements, patrol routes, and potential threats. Her experience allowed her to see patterns others missed, connections invisible to those who relied solely on protocol and procedure. One of the skeptical SEALs, arms crossed, muttered, "Looks like she's just observing." Elena caught the tone but didn't respond. Observation was a skill. Patience was a weapon. The drone feeds flickered, showing the terrain they would soon traverse, the fortified compound that housed the hostages, and the mercenaries who would not hesitate to fire on sight. She memorized the angles, the shadows, the possible ambush points. Every glance, every flicker of movement in the feed was catalogued, analyzed, and stored mentally for rapid recall. Minutes stretched into hours as the operation details were disseminated. Elena's role was clear: reconnaissance, entry coordination, and rapid adaptation in case of unexpected complications. Her calm, precise commands and observations began to silence the doubters. Slowly, the men who had challenged her earlier began to nod subtly, their skepticism replaced with cautious acknowledgement. The knife at her hip gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, a quiet symbol of credibility, experience, and silent authority. Finally, General Marcus Holloway entered, moving with the ease of someone who commanded not through words, but through presence. His eyes scanned the room, taking in every officer, every soldier, every detail. Then they landed on Elena, and he paused, picking up the knife she had left on the table. His fingers traced the etching with deliberate care, and his lips curved into a faint, approving smile. Without raising his voice, he leaned slightly forward and whispered to the men around him. "Only real operators carry that." The room froze. The sentence was soft, almost imperceptible, yet it carried the weight of authority, experience, and respect. Skepticism evaporated, replaced by a quiet understanding. Elena did not need to speak. The general had spoken for her. Validation had arrived, not through argument or explanation, but through silent acknowledgement by the highest authority present. The remainder of the briefing unfolded with a different energy. The men no longer questioned her presence. Instead, they observed her with cautious attention, aware that their effectiveness in the field could depend on her competence. Elena outlined her observations, detailing the approach routes, timing sequences, and fallback positions. Every motion, every word, was calculated and deliberate. Her instructions were clear, precise, and actionable. The team's focus shifted entirely from doubt to execution, the mission itself taking center stage over personal skepticism. By the time the briefing concluded, the initial tension in the room had been replaced with a quiet, professional respect. Elena's presence, once questioned, was now an integral part of the operation. She had proven, without boasting, without argument, without raising her voice, that she belonged not because of appearances or gender, but because of capability, experience, and unwavering resolve. Outside the command center, the night had deepened. Helicopters hummed in preparation, vehicles lined up for deployment, and the air was thick with anticipation. Elena adjusted her pack once more, checking each strap, each pouch, each piece of gear. The knife at her hip was a comforting weight, a reminder of everything she had survived and everything she was prepared to face. The challenge had been met, but the true test was still ahead. Operation Silent Veil awaited, demanding every ounce of skill, courage, and leadership she possessed. And as she walked toward the staging area, her eyes forward and her heart steady, Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was ready. The whispers, the doubts, and the skepticism of her peers had been silenced not by words, but by silent proof of endurance, competence, and authority. The mission would soon prove everything else. The briefing room had grown quiet after hours of maps, satellite feeds, and simulated planning exercises. Officers and operators had pored over contingencies, debated tactics, and rehashed every possible scenario for Operation Silent Veil. Elena Reyes stood at the edge, her body calm but her mind alert, cataloging every detail: patrol rotations, rooftop vantage points, lines of fire, escape routes. She had walked into this room hours ago, under the scrutiny of seasoned soldiers, each silently questioning her place. Now, as the team reviewed final approaches and backup contingencies, the air was heavy with tension. At that moment, General Marcus Holloway entered, moving through the room with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to command. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he allowed the room to sense his presence, his eyes scanning every officer, every table, every tactical display with meticulous precision. His gaze was calm but penetrating, the kind that could see through pretense and hesitation alike. Operators instinctively straightened, military posture sharpened reflexively, as though the room itself understood the weight of his presence. And then his eyes fell on her. Elena, accustomed to scrutiny, did not flinch. Her stance was relaxed but ready, her eyes steady, scanning the monitors as she had done all day. She felt a subtle shift in the room, something imperceptible to most, but palpable to those attuned to the nuances of command. The general moved closer, approaching the table where Elena had placed her combat knife earlier. The blade, worn and scarred, gleamed faintly under the cold fluorescent light. It bore the etched trident and initials of fallen comrades, a symbol of the crucible she had endured and survived. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as Holloway picked up the knife, turning it slowly in his hands. Every eye followed the motion, every whisper of doubt momentarily silenced. This was no ceremonial gesture. The general's fingers traced the etching with deliberate care, his expression unreadable, yet heavy with the authority of experience. He had handled countless operators in his career, judged skill and resolve countless times before. His touch on that knife was a quiet acknowledgement, recognition not of rank or gender, but of action, endurance, and authenticity. Finally, he spoke, a whisper so low it seemed almost intimate, yet it resonated with unmistakable authority. Only real operators carry that. The words were simple, yet their impact was profound. The room froze, the subtle hum of machinery and monitors fading into a tense silence. Elena's peers, the same men who had circled her earlier, questioning, doubting, smirking, looked on, their skepticism replaced with sudden understanding. Some shifted uneasily, acknowledging for the first time that the proof of her experience was not in medals or paperwork, but in the scars and symbols of the work she had done. This whisper carried weight beyond words. It was validation from the ultimate authority in the room. Elena did not speak. She did not need to. Her calm demeanor and the subtle, powerful acknowledgement from the general conveyed everything necessary. Trust was often earned silently, in actions and symbols, and she had already earned it. The knife, resting now in the general's hands, was a silent testament to endurance, skill, and courage. Operators who had doubted her presence now regarded her with newfound respect, the whispers of ridicule replaced by quiet observation. The general replaced the knife on the table, his eyes still on Elena, a faint nod accompanying the gesture. He turned his attention to the rest of the room, delivering concise, precise instructions that carried the same weight as his earlier whisper. Elena absorbed every word, cross-referencing with her mental maps, noting adjustments and timing sequences. The room's energy had shifted subtly. The skepticism was gone, replaced by professional focus, a unity of purpose that was essential for the mission ahead. Minutes passed in a tense silence as the team processed the significance of the general's gesture. Elena, though, remained composed. She had survived Hell Week, countless training operations, and real-world deployments where life and death hung in the balance. Yet the doubt she had faced today had been a test of a different kind, not physical, but psychological. The general's whisper had not merely validated her presence. It had reminded the room that trust and respect in the military were earned, not assumed, and that true competence was often invisible until observed under pressure. A young officer, still hesitant, asked a question about entry points. Elena stepped forward calmly, outlining her plan with clarity, precision, and authority. She highlighted potential ambush zones, escape routes, and timing adjustments that would minimize risk. Each point she made was supported by her extensive knowledge and prior experience. Her voice was calm, measured, and deliberate, carrying the assurance of someone who had survived situations far deadlier than any hypothetical threat displayed on a map. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room transformed. Men who had doubted her now leaned in, absorbing every detail, checking their notes, and aligning their own plans with hers. Her competence was undeniable. It was no longer a question of gender, rank, or appearance. It was a matter of skill, insight, and leadership. The room had shifted from skepticism to reliance, a subtle but significant change that could determine the success of Operation Silent Veil. The general observed quietly, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. He understood what had transpired without needing words. A young lieutenant commander, doubted by many, had now earned the trust of an entire unit through a combination of silent proof and unwavering professionalism. This was the essence of elite military leadership. Respect earned through action, not assumed through authority or position. Finally, the general's voice broke the silence, delivering instructions with crisp efficiency. The team moved into their final preparations for deployment, each operator now focused, aware that the success of the mission depended on flawless execution. Elena, standing at the edge, adjusted her gear, feeling the familiar weight of her weapon and knife. The knife had served as both tool and symbol, a silent reminder of trials overcome and respect earned. She breathed deeply, centering herself for the task ahead. As the operators filed out to the staging area, the room retained a quiet energy of professionalism and respect. Elena's earlier doubts and the challenges she had faced were no longer relevant. She had been validated, not through accolades, not through speeches, but through the quiet acknowledgement of the general, the whisper that had resonated louder than any argument. Only real operators carry that. Outside the briefing room, the night had deepened. The base hummed with covert activity, helicopters being fueled, vehicles being prepped, radios calibrated, and teams moving with practiced precision. Elena walked among her peers, silent, calm, and focused. Her mind was already running through the sequences of the mission, cross-referencing every detail with her own mental simulations. Every movement, every command, every observation would count. Tonight, the general's whisper had done more than silence doubt. It had cemented her place among her peers, transforming skepticism into cautious trust. The knife at her hip, the scars of experience on her hands, and the clarity in her eyes were proof not just of past endurance, but of her readiness for the trials ahead. Operation Silent Veil awaited, dangerous and unpredictable, but Elena was no longer facing it with whispers of doubt lingering in the air. She was acknowledged, respected, and ready to lead. As she approached the staging area, her team assembling quietly behind her, Elena felt the familiar rhythm of anticipation and focus. The mission would test every skill, every instinct, every ounce of courage she possessed. And now, with the general's whisper still echoing in her mind, she carried not just her gear and weapons, but the silent validation that she had earned the respect of those whose judgment mattered most. The briefing room was filled with a tension that only comes before a mission with lives on the line. Elena Reyes stood at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the assembled team. The operators were all highly trained, disciplined, and lethal. Yet even the most experienced among them had subtle glances of uncertainty. They had witnessed her skill and endurance in training. But now, as the mission loomed, the question was not about her legitimacy. It was about her leadership under imminent threat. The operation was Silent Veil, a hostage extraction deep within hostile territory in East Africa. The target, a fortified compound holding 5 foreign diplomats. Intel indicated mercenaries were heavily armed and trained, with patrol rotations optimized to detect intruders. Failure was not an option. Every detail had to be precise. Every step had to be calculated. Elena, standing at the front, adjusted her tactical vest and began to outline the operation. Reconnaissance indicates 2 primary patrol shifts, she said, her voice calm, commanding, carrying over the low hum of murmurs. First, the outer perimeter. Sensors show motion patterns are irregular, but predictable if we synchronize entry times. Second, the interior rotations. Guards change positions every 12 minutes. One misstep, one miscalculation, and the hostages' lives are compromised. Her eyes flicked across the team, making sure everyone understood the stakes. There was no room for error. Elena pulled up the digital map on the central screen, tracing the routes they would take. She pointed out vantage points, blind spots, and potential choke points where enemy patrols could ambush them. We move fast. Precision first, engagement second. Extraction is our priority. Neutralize threats only if necessary and maintain communication at all times. Radios are synchronized. If any deviation occurs, fallback plan Delta is immediate. She paused, letting the gravity of the instructions sink in. Operators nodded subtly, some checking notes, others running mental simulations. She then addressed the entry team specifically, a smaller squad designated for direct contact with the hostages. You are the tip of the spear. Entry must be clean, silent, controlled. The moment we breach, you secure the hostages and provide cover until the extraction point is reached. Timing is critical. Everyone must move as one. Her gaze swept the room, making sure the responsibility of their roles was understood. Leadership was not about asserting authority, she knew, but about clarity, trust, and communication. A young operator raised a hand nervously. "Ma'am, what about surveillance gaps near the South Tower?" Elena's eyes flicked to the monitor displaying live drone footage. "South Tower is blind for 30 seconds every rotation," she said. "We exploit that gap. Your movement must be synchronized precisely. Any hesitation will be visible. Timing is everything." The operator nodded, writing notes furiously, reassured by her confidence. She outlined the fallback plans in detail. Multiple extraction points, alternate routes if engagement escalated, and contingencies for incapacitated team members. Every scenario was addressed, every detail scrutinized. Alana's experience shone through not just in knowledge, but in the calm precision of her delivery. No one doubted her competence now. It was evident in the methodical way she guided the team through complex tactical decisions. Next, she addressed communications and coordination. Once we breach, maintain line of sight and radio contact at all times. Use code words to signal extraction or threats. Silence on comms unless necessary. Any unnecessary noise compromises operational security. We move as a unit. Any rogue actions jeopardize the mission. The operators nodded, absorbing every word. Her clarity and confidence began to instill not just understanding, but trust, transforming skepticism into reliance. Elena then discussed individual responsibilities, ensuring every operator knew their role inside and outside the compound. She paired team members based on complementary skills, tactical proficiency, and prior experience. Two-man teams cover corridors and rooms. One operator provides suppression fire if engagement occurs. Each member has a secondary role in case of incapacitation. Redundancy is crucial. The officers noted her meticulous planning, recognizing the depth of her experience and tactical foresight. As the briefing concluded, the team gathered around for final preparations. Elena walked quietly among them, adjusting gear, checking weapon systems, and confirming comm synchronization. Her calm, focused presence was a stabilizing force. Doubts had long been silenced. Now, what remained was concentration, readiness, and trust in her leadership. She double-checked her pack, ensuring her knives, weapons, and gear were secured. Every move was deliberate, rehearsed, and precise, a testament to countless hours of training and real-world operations. The general entered once more, observing quietly. He watched Elena interact with the team, guiding without dictating, instructing without belittling. His eyes lingered on her for a moment, subtle acknowledgement in the set of his jaw. The team's confidence, now visibly heightened, reflected her competence. Respect had been earned, not demanded, and it radiated from the room. The general said nothing. Sometimes, the absence of words carried the weight of approval far more than any statement could. As the operators began moving toward staging areas, Elena remained at the edge, scanning her surroundings, ensuring every gear check, every tactical consideration was complete. She mentally reviewed entry points, extraction sequences, and potential threats. Her heart rate remained steady, her focus absolute. She visualized the mission unfolding, every patrol, every corridor, every rotation, committing to memory the rhythm of the compound and the patterns of their adversaries. Hours passed as vehicles and helicopters were prepped, teams assembled, and last-minute adjustments made. Elena moved with quiet authority, ensuring each operator knew their role, understood the timing, and trusted the plan. She checked her weapons once more, feeling the reassuring weight in her hands. Every element of the mission had been considered, every detail rehearsed, every risk evaluated. Confidence now radiated from the team, a subtle yet powerful shift from the whispers of doubt earlier. Finally, the moment arrived to move toward deployment. The staging area was tense, alive with quiet energy. Operators loaded into helicopters and vehicles with practiced efficiency, every eye forward, every mind focused. Elena took her place among them, observing silently, ensuring synchronization, confirming positions, and reviewing mental checklists. The mission, high stakes and unpredictable, would test every skill, every instinct, every ounce of courage and resilience the team possessed. Elena's hand rested lightly on her combat knife, a silent reminder of her past trials, the validation of the general's whisper, and the endurance that had brought her here. Every operator in the unit now understood one undeniable fact. This mission's success would rely on the precise execution of every plan, and that their leader, Elena Reyes, was more than capable of guiding them through the crucible that awaited. As the helicopters lifted silently into the night sky, carrying the operators toward their objective, Elena closed her eyes for a brief second. She visualized the compound, the movements of the mercenaries, the paths they would take, and the extraction sequence. Each detail was etched into her mind with the clarity of long experience and calm calculation. The weight of the mission settled around her like a tangible presence, but she felt no fear, only readiness. Tonight, Operation Silent Veil would begin. The stakes were as high as they could be, lives hanging in the balance, and the world unaware of the operation, unfolding in the darkness. Elena's focus, leadership, and precision would be tested to the limit. And as the night swallowed the helicopters and the vehicles carrying the team into unknown danger, one certainty remained. She was prepared, her team trusted her, and the mission would either cement her legacy or demand everything she had to survive. The night air was thick with tension as the helicopters hovered over the dense terrain surrounding the mercenary compound. Shadows stretched across the ground, fragmented by the dim moonlight filtering through swaying trees. Elena Reyes gripped the straps of her tactical vest, eyes scanning the dark horizon with unwavering focus. Every detail mattered: the crunch of gravel under distant footsteps, the faint hum of generators inside the compound, the rhythm of enemy patrols. Seconds stretched into eternity. As the aircraft touched down in a concealed clearing, the operators moved with disciplined precision. Elena led the team, her presence a silent anchor amid the quiet hum of tension. The earlier skepticism of her peers had dissolved. Now, in the real crucible of impending combat, the team relied on her judgment, her calm decisiveness, and the clarity of her planning. She signaled, and the unit split into two-man teams, advancing toward the compound along predetermined routes. Every movement was deliberate, every step synchronized. The outer perimeter came into view, high walls topped with barbed wire, floodlights rotating in slow, sweeping arcs, and armed guards patrolling in calculated patterns. Elena crouched behind a fallen tree, scanning for the optimal entry point. "Wait for the blind spot at 2 o'clock, she whispered, pointing toward a faint shadow in the compound's corner. The team froze, waiting for the exact timing she had memorized from drone reconnaissance. This was the moment precision mattered more than firepower. As the team slipped through the shadows, Elena led the entry squad toward a side entrance. She signaled a halt, listening intently to the rhythm of guard movements. One misstep, one premature noise, and the mission and lives of the hostages could be compromised. Her pulse remained steady, her breathing calm. Years of Hell Week, countless hours of reconnaissance training, and countless prior missions had honed her senses to a razor edge. The first guard came into view, silhouetted against the floodlights. Elena's hand moved with lightning precision. A swift motion, a trained strike, and the mercenary crumpled silently to the ground. The team followed her lead, neutralizing threats efficiently and quietly. Elena's actions were methodical, demonstrating both lethal skill and tactical discipline. The room full of skeptical operators from Fort Ashland had now become a cohesive unit, following her commands without hesitation. Inside the compound, the tension intensified. Corridors were narrow, rooms heavily fortified, and the enemy was trained to react to even the slightest disturbance. Elena signaled to her squad to fan out, checking each doorway and covering blind spots. The hostages were located in a secure room on the second floor. Every second counted. Every misstep could trigger a firefight. Her mind ran through every possible contingency: exit strategies, fallback points, and engagement scenarios. Suddenly, a mercenary rounded a corner unexpectedly. Elena reacted instantly, stepping into the line of fire to intercept. A brief struggle ensued, her combat knife flashing under the dim light before the threat was subdued. Adrenaline surged, but her focus remained unshaken. She signaled her team forward, moving with the calm authority of someone who had faced life-or-death situations countless times. Each movement was precise, controlled, and calculated to maximize efficiency while minimizing risk to the hostages. As they reached the room holding the hostages, Elena paused. She signaled the team to hold positions while she assessed the situation. 5 diplomats were bound and visibly frightened, guards stationed just outside the door. Elena's mind calculated angles, distances, and timings. With a precise combination of distraction and silent takedown techniques, the guards were neutralized without triggering alarms. The hostages looked up, confusion and relief mingling in their eyes. Elena's calm presence reassured them, and she motioned for the team to begin extraction. The exit was even more dangerous than the entry. Patrols were unpredictable, and any sound could draw attention. Elena coordinated movements with silent hand signals and subtle gestures, guiding her team and the hostages through shadows and narrow passages. A sudden noise behind them drew the team's attention. A patrol had spotted a faint movement. Elena quickly assessed the situation, calculating risk versus speed. "Move fast. Use the stairwell on your left." "Cover me," she whispered. Operators adjusted instantly, following her lead with precision. Gunfire erupted suddenly as the patrol opened fire from the rooftop. Elena dove for cover, returning fire with controlled bursts. Her team responded in kind, suppressing enemy fire while keeping the hostages shielded. Smoke grenades created visual barriers, confusion rippling through the mercenary ranks. Every decision Elena made in those seconds balanced life, safety, and mission objectives. The operators relied on her instinct, timing, and experience to navigate the chaos. As the team reached the extraction point, Elena ensured the hostages were secured, radios checked, and movement synchronized with incoming helicopters. The enemy had begun to regroup, closing in rapidly, but Elena's planning had accounted for multiple contingencies. The team moved with precision, suppressing threats efficiently while remaining coordinated. The helicopters descended, skimming low to avoid detection, as the operators guided the hostages aboard with disciplined swiftness. Once all personnel were aboard, Elena conducted a final sweep of the immediate area, ensuring no threats remained. Her eyes scanned for potential ambushes, sniper positions, or explosives. Every step of the operation had been executed with meticulous precision, yet she remained vigilant, knowing danger was never truly over until they were safely clear. The helicopters lifted off, carrying the team and hostages away from the compound. Elena allowed herself a brief moment to exhale, her hands still gripping her weapon, eyes scanning the terrain below. The mission had been a success, yet the adrenaline still surged through her veins. Operators who had once doubted her now looked at her with genuine respect, some even silently acknowledging her leadership and skill. The general's whisper earlier that day, "Only real operators carry that," had proven prophetic in every sense. As the aircraft moved toward safety, Elena's mind already began reviewing the operation. What went right? What could have been improved? And the performance of each operator. She noted subtle adjustments for future missions, ensuring lessons learned were cataloged for the next high-stakes scenario. Her calm demeanor, tactical precision, and unshakable resolve had guided her team through the fire, earning not just success in the field, but respect that words alone could never convey. Tonight, Operation Silent Veil had tested more than skill. It had tested leadership, trust, and the power of quiet validation in the face of doubt. Elena Reyes had proven not through argument or assertion, but through decisive action under fire that she belonged. The mission had demanded everything: courage, intelligence, and instinct. And she had delivered, ensuring the safety of the hostages and the cohesion of her team. As the night sky stretched above, stars reflecting off the calm waters below, Elena allowed herself a fleeting sense of relief. She had survived, led, and triumphed, yet she knew the journey was far from over. Every mission, every operation, was a new test of resolve. But one fact remained immutable: her skill, her endurance, and her quiet authority had silenced doubt and earned her rightful place among the most elite operators in the field. The morning sun crept over Fort Ashland, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Elena Reyes stood at attention, her uniform crisp, her boots polished to a reflective sheen. The events of the past 24 hours still hummed in her veins. The high-stakes operation, the silent acknowledgments, the whispered doubts that had finally been silenced by action. The mission had been a success, yet today was not about medals, accolades, or public recognition. Today was about legacy, about trust earned and respect cemented among those who mattered most. General Marcus Holloway approached quietly, his stride confident yet measured. Operators and officers had begun to assemble for a debriefing, but the general's eyes were on Elena. There was a subtle gravitas in his gaze, a recognition that went far beyond rank or reputation. He stopped in front of her, holding her gaze without a word. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, a gesture that spoke volumes. In the language of the military, no words were needed. The nod alone acknowledged what actions had proven, that Elena was not just capable, but exceptional. The debriefing commenced. The team recounted the mission in detail, the timing of patrols, the breaches, the extraction of hostages, and the unexpected threats neutralized. Elena listened quietly, occasionally interjecting with clarifications or observations. Her presence was both authoritative and understated, a balance she had honed over years of training, operations, and trials that had tested body, mind, and spirit alike. One of the operators, a veteran with years of deployments under his belt, spoke up. "I doubted her," he admitted, his voice carrying a mixture of humility and respect. "I thought she wouldn't make it through Hell Week, and I wasn't sure she belonged here. But tonight, I was wrong. She led us. Every move was precise. Every decision saved lives. I trust her with mine. No questions asked." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Elena acknowledged him with a subtle nod, a gesture of respect and shared accomplishment rather than pride. The general finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of command and experience. "This operation demonstrates what we've always known about elite operators. Skill and courage cannot be judged by appearances. Lieutenant Commander Reyes has shown, through decisive action under extreme conditions, that she is among the best. Her judgment, precision, and leadership have not only ensured the success of this mission, but have inspired confidence in every operator present." Elena's thoughts drifted briefly to the early days of her training, to the icy Pacific surf, the endless mud pits, and the instructors who had called her dead weight. Those memories, once painful, now served as quiet reminders of the journey she had undertaken to arrive here. Each test of endurance, each moment of doubt from peers, each whispered criticism had forged her into the operator she had become. The recognition today was not about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that resilience and determination could overcome any obstacle. After the debriefing, the team dispersed, leaving Elena and the general alone. He gestured toward the compound's tactical displays, now inactive, and spoke quietly, almost conversationally. Most operators go their whole careers without seeing the level of trust, responsibility, and coordination you demonstrated tonight. You've earned it all. But more importantly, you've earned the respect of those who doubted you. Elena's gaze remained steady. "It wasn't about proving them right or wrong, sir," she said. "It was about doing the mission and keeping everyone safe. Respect follows performance, not the other way around." The general nodded, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. There was a shared understanding between them. Competence, integrity, and leadership were proven in action, not words, and Elena had just exemplified that principle at the highest level. Word of the mission's success spread quietly through Fort Ashland. Operators who had once questioned Elena now sought her counsel, valuing her insight, tactical acumen, and calm decisiveness. She became a mentor and leader, someone whose example could shape the next generation of elite operators. Her presence at the base no longer provoked skepticism but inspired focus, confidence, and determination among those who served alongside her. Elena also found herself reflecting on the personal significance of this journey. Beyond recognition and respect, she had discovered something deeper, the power of resilience, the quiet strength that emerges when one refuses to yield in the face of doubt. Every scar, every bruise, every sleepless night during training and missions had contributed to this moment of professional and personal affirmation. It was a validation not given by others, but earned through unyielding dedication and courage. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena walked alone across the base. The wind carried a cool, salt-tinged breeze, reminding her of the days on Coronado when she had fought to survive Hell Week. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, acknowledging the distance she had traveled, from the youngest, doubted candidate to a proven leader, respected and trusted by those she commanded. A young recruit approached cautiously, eyes wide with curiosity and reverence. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I heard about the operation. And about you. How did you do it?" Elena studied him, recognizing the same mixture of doubt and aspiration she had once carried. She knelt slightly to meet his gaze and spoke quietly but firmly. "Focus on the mission. Train harder than anyone else, and never let doubt, yours or anyone else's, define your limits. Respect is earned through action, courage, and integrity. Everything else follows." The recruit nodded, absorbing the lesson as though it were a map for his own journey. Elena stood, adjusting her vest and equipment, and continued walking across the base. Each step was purposeful, reflective of a lifetime of preparation, endurance, and trials that had led to this moment. Her legacy was not written in medals or ceremonies alone, but in the trust she inspired, the lives she saved, and the example she set for those who would follow in her footsteps. Back in the command center, General Holloway observed from a distance, a satisfied expression on his face. The mission had succeeded, the team was intact, and the operators had emerged more cohesive, disciplined, and confident under Elena's leadership. The general knew that Elena's presence had shifted perceptions permanently, demonstrating that skill, courage, and resilience transcend expectation, bias, and doubt. In the weeks that followed, Elena continued to train, lead, and mentor, quietly shaping the next wave of elite operators. Her name became synonymous with competence, courage, and unwavering resolve. She had faced skepticism, endured grueling trials, and survived real combat, and in doing so, had proven that determination, skill, and integrity were more powerful than any preconception. Years later, recruits would speak of her story, the woman who had survived Hell Week, faced doubt from every direction, and led a high-stakes mission with precision and courage. They would recount the whisper from the general. "Only real operators carry that," a phrase that encapsulated the respect she had earned not by words, but through relentless action, resilience, and excellence. Elena Reyes had become more than an operator. She had become a symbol of determination, of earned respect, and of the truth that courage and skill transcend expectation. Her legacy was secure, not in medals or ceremonies, but in the lives she saved, the teams she led, and the countless operators who would carry her lessons forward. The story of her journey, from doubt to triumph, from scrutiny to recognition, would inspire those who came after her to believe in themselves, even when the world questioned their place. And as she stood once more on the parade ground, the morning sun casting long shadows at her feet, Elena allowed herself a quiet moment of satisfaction. She had faced every challenge, proven her worth, and left an indelible mark on those around her. Respect had been earned, courage had been validated, and legacy had been established. She was not just a SEAL. She was a leader, a mentor, and a testament to the power of perseverance, skill, and unwavering resolve.